Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Heather Hansen, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at the Leeds School of Business. We're excited to have Telaine Medanner presenting on Managing Up, Creating an Effective Relationship with Your Boss for today's webinar, and she's joining us all the way from London, so we're super excited to have her today. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, if you have any questions now or during the presentation that you would like to ask Telaine, please send a question through the chat interface. I will monitor questions as they are submitted, and Telaine will respond to them throughout and at the end of the presentation. As a reminder, for optimum audio quality, we do have everyone on mute except for myself and our speaker. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please notify us through the chat interface, and one of our chat support specialists will touch base. Lastly, a link to access the webinar recording will be sent to all registrants later today, along with a survey link and supplemental resources from today's presentation. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Telaine Medanner is the owner and founder of LifeCoach.com and the best-selling author of Coach Yourself to Success. She has gained international prominence as a professional life coach by guiding thousands of people to create their ideal life and find wealth, success, and happiness. As a leader in the cutting-edge field of personal coaching, Telaine helps people restructure their lives to easily attract the opportunities they want. Telaine teaches for Georgetown University's Institute for Transformational Leadership and Coaching, where she leads courses on authentic leadership. She holds a degree in International Affairs from Georgetown School of Foreign Service, as well as a master's in English. Prior to becoming a life coach, Telaine held a corporate position as second vice president at Chase Bank in Manhattan. One of the most widely recognized life coaches in the world, Telaine has been featured in numerous magazines from Newsweek to Men's Fitness and has appeared on national and international television and radio programs, including the BBC and CBS Saturday Morning. Telaine has successfully coached thousands of people to reach their dreams and achieve their greatest ambitions, from becoming a star of the stage to breaking through the corporate glass ceiling. Welcome, Telaine, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Heather. We've got a really big topic to go, which is actually going to take 2 weeks to cover. So this Managing Up is a hairy old thing, working with your boss. But before we get started, I kind of want to find out a little, these webinars are a bit of a one-way street, but we're going to break in the middle for questions and also at the end. And then because there is a part 2 next week, I'm going to actually give you guys homework to do. Like any self-respecting coach, I'll give homework. And we're going to have a chance to really tailor it on your specific questions. So I'm really going to encourage you to send in your chat questions via the chat function. Heather will collect those, and I'm going to try to, and even if we don't get to your question, I will have the opportunity to look at it over the next week and incorporate it into the talk the following week. So really great chance to get what you really want out of this webinar and what you're personally dealing with. So, but we thought we'd start with a fun poll question. So Heather, if you would be willing to start that would be great.
Absolutely.
So this is a question we're going to ask you to figure out, to take what kind of boss you actually have, what kind of manager you have.
Yes, great. Yeah, so if everyone can start voting, it looks like we already have about 40% of you who voted, so we'll give you a few more seconds.
That's quick, isn't it?
Yeah, everyone is on it today. All right, we're almost at 80%, so we'll give you about 10 more seconds.
Doesn't take long to figure out what kind of boss you have. You're probably so acquainted.
Yes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this vote. And we had, so for a tie, 42% of our attendees have a micromanager, 42% identified with a crazy maker, so changes things, new ideas, with the 2 following are at 21% being terribly indecisive and a narcissist.
Okay, great. And how many were the crazy maker?
41%.
41%, wow, so it's almost tied with a micromanager. Great. And then next was narcissist, is that right?
Yep, so we have 42 at a micromanager, 42%, as a crazy maker, and then 21% terribly indecisive, 21% a narcissist, and 11% nepotistic.
Okay. Good. Well, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. And we're going to be able to touch on all of these during the course of at least this week. We'll touch on those in the next week as well. So feel free to send in your particular challenges with your particular manager or boss so that we can tailor this as much as possible to what is actually going on with you. So I got lifecoach.com because I was one of the first coaches out there. So I've been doing this for quite a few years now, over 20 years. And I think most people now, I saw there was a Dilbert cartoon with a life coach in it. And I thought, okay, we've made Dilbert, we're on the map. So I probably don't need to explain why people would use a coach. But, same reason why you'd use a personal trainer at the gym. If you go and work out with a trainer at the gym, you'll find out you get a much better workout and you usually prevent injury as well, and, can really get yourself in good shape working with. Plus, it's more fun to work out with a personal trainer at the gym. It's a lot more fun. And coaching is like that as well. We have that outside perspective on people's lives and can usually see things pretty quickly that you're missing. And I was just talking to another gal who, in just half an hour, she was going to go down the path of getting an MBA and going off to that. And then she slipped in some little question, just a little comment saying, but actually I'm sort of a healer. And I said, whoa, these are two different things. Let's figure out which way to go. But it's just, people kind of neglect these parts and they think that they can't do, whether your secret ambition is to do something and you think you can't for some reason. A lot of people have that. So we help people figure out what it is they really want to do when they grow up, make midlife career transitions, figure out what they want to do when they retire and have a sort of fun hobby lifestyle career at that point. People in transition. So that's why people use coaches. And it's usually at some point where they're feeling a lack of clarity or direction in their own lives for whatever reason and want that extra perspective. So, and coaching is not consulting. So consultants typically have a body of expertise or information that they're sharing with you. We're not therapists either, so we're not going to give you counseling in the traditional sense or psychotherapy. That's a different field altogether. So really, if you look at what life coaching is, it's most similar to sports coaching in that it's an encouraging, supportive, inspiring, and challenging relationship. Okay, so that's what I do with people. Now, let's go on to our topic here. Why would you want to learn to manage up? And obviously, you guys are here, so you probably have some ideas if you want to do it. But usually it's because you've got one of those, you've got some sort of a crazy boss of some sort or another, micromanager or whatever, and you're not quite sure how to manage the situation. So hopefully I'll give you a few coaching tips today that you can take away with it and immediately start to implement and immediately improve your relationship with your manager. But I think people oftentimes, I think this has happened more than ever now. In fact, I was just reading about another university that's requiring their employees to take their cell phones and mobile devices with them on holidays and vacations now. And they expect a reply in 24 hours. I thought, you know what? That's not a holiday, is it? It really isn't a holiday if you're expected to reply in 24 hours. So, this is being controlled by a boss manager or company. In this case, it was a university in New York. So, this is a serious problem. People come in on weekends or they have to take their work with them, have to work late. Sometimes people, during the recession, a lot of times people were working, and I don't know if it's improved much, but people were having to take over 2 or 3 jobs for people and not get paid anymore for that. People being unappreciated, overworked, overloaded, too many expectations. So there's a lot of reasons why it's worth learning how to manage your own manager. And if you take charge of that relationship, obviously in a subtle way, so that you let your boss know your boss is boss. You want to always do that. And you always want to make your boss look good. But that you take charge of that relationship instead of feeling like you're the victim or that you're just have to do whatever your boss says. So I'm going to give you some tools today so that you can have a really powerful relationship with your manager and set up some boundaries so that you're not being taken advantage of as well. Okay? So we'll work on that. This week and next, these are the key areas that I'd like to address. So we'll talk about how well you're managing up already and see where you might improve. We're going to look at putting in place boundaries with your boss and colleagues. and so that you don't get taken advantage of, but are respected. We'll look at teamwork, how you can be a better team player. We'll look at your own personal work-life balance, so we'll take a look at balance. Self-management, how you can manage yourself better as well, so we'll talk about that. Communication, some communication skills and tools that you can use to better effectively communicate what it is you do want, so that you can communicate in a way that will get better results with both your manager and your other colleagues. We'll talk about quality work, initiative, and career path, where you are on your own career path. So it's obviously quite a bit to cover in just 2 hours of topic. So again, we're going to do one today, and we'll see how much we get through. But we'll go through these, and of course you can ask your own questions as well at what you're particularly dealing with, right? So let's talk a little bit about these crazy bosses. We've got the narcissist boss who is very self-centered, egotistical, arrogant. This is the kind of boss who takes credit for your ideas, doesn't acknowledge your work or contributions to it. So that is your typical narcissist. And apparently, 21% of you have that. So we'll talk about how you can manage this sort of boss, male or female, it doesn't matter. Then there's the micromanaging boss, the control freak. And this is a boss who you may feel doesn't trust you, that they're requiring too many reports or too many, that you always have to check in, that they want to do things a particular way and not give you any free rein. So the micromanaging boss, or the control freak boss. The indecisive boss, this is the one who can't make up their minds and can't make a decision. Very difficult, because that's one of the things we look to in the leader, is to be the ultimate person to make a decision. Nepotism, favoritism, it can be family members that they're actually using, or I had one client who, her boss brought over a team of 5 key people from a company. When she moved to that company, she brought her team with her, and they were like this little inner circle club, and nobody could seem to break through. And so this was the challenge of, how do I get recognized when this boss already has a little cadre in place and doesn't seem to be interested in learning really how others can contribute. And then, of course, the crazy maker, which is a real popular one here. The boss who's always coming up with new ideas, new projects, is saying, oh, I've got a better idea today, let's change this, and is constantly coming up with new ideas, new ways to do things before you can even get your project off the ground. So that's and then you might have other bosses, so feel free to send in. If I haven't, these are the most common, but if I missed your boss, send that in to me, and we'll add it to the list for the next time, okay? So we'll talk about how, what tools, what techniques work for each type of boss that you're dealing with. Because who knows when you're going to get the next one. And the good news is, and I should just go back on this, the communication skills that you can learn pretty much work on almost all of these. So this is the good thing. We're going to learn a couple of tools that can, whatever boss you have, this will serve you well. So that's a kind of one-size-fits-all communication tool. So we'll get to that too. But I think it helps when you start looking at this is a chart of the range of normal human behavior. And so you'll see that people can go all the way up in these 4 categories of dominance, influencing, steadiness, and compliance. So in dominance, we're looking at how people respond to challenges and problems. And this is one of the computerized assessments that we use in the company. But I've just pulled out this key sheet because I think it's interesting to see if you understand the range of human behavior and kind of see where your own boss might fall out. Now, this is actually the shaded areas. This is a real person here. And the shaded areas show where this particular person shows up. And people will be all over the map on these. This is what we call the high dominance. The high dominance is shaded way up almost to the top here, to egocentric. Well, there you go. There's your narcissist right up there. Some people will fall lower down. They might just be just a little bit above the line here on inquisitive in how they respond to challenges and problems. But you've got this, the dominant character is the boss who is typically your type A personality that you think of, the aggressive, go-getting, determined. And you think of somebody like Margaret Thatcher is that character. Fidel Castro would be a high dominant character. Barking orders, very quick to anger, don't seem terribly emotional necessarily. So it's just going to be really direct and curt and to the point. And so understanding when you have, this could be your boss, and it typically is, the high Ds are good decision makers. They're quick to make a decision, almost impulsively so. But they can also be quite, scary. They actually scare people. You think Fidel Castro, a bit scary. So when you look at your high D characters, that is a profile type very common in a lot of bosses. So you'll see that particularly, for example, you think like the standard hierarchical military barking orders, that kind of thing. This can be your high D boss. Now, this particular person here, of course, below the line is the opposite of that. So if you've got the indecisive boss, they're probably below the line here on dominance and more in the hesitant, unsure, cautious, maybe calculating, needing some time to think about things, very slow to anger, but also very, not quick to make decision, basically. So that would be your an indecisive boss, for those of you who have that. Again, different style. So you can see you're going to get bosses all over the map on here. The yellow one here, influencing, is how people influence you to their point of view. And this is, if you think effusive at the top, that would be somebody like Bette Midler, really bubbly and effusive, inspiring. Bill Clinton was considered a very charming, magnetic, and inspiring leader. So that sort of warmth that you see, that's this sort of, and in the UK we got Tony Blair, was sort of a charming, when people are charming and friendly and warm, that's because they're using their influencing to charm you in a way and influence you verbally, persuasive people to their point of view. And your best salespeople will be the influencers. So you can see your typical leadership, like the ideal leadership, really has some D in them because they can make some decisions, the dominance. Plus they have some warmth about them, some friendliness, and they care about people. So if you can combine these two, that would be your classic ideal leader. And not necessarily that as high up as these guys are, but so that Jessica says those are what we consider the classic leadership role. But you can see there's leaders all over the place and managers all over the place. Sometimes they won't have that decisiveness about them. Sometimes they're not warm and friendly. So if they're below the line here on influencing, they might be more cool and logical and not so demonstrative and not initially trusting, but more skeptical of things. So again, totally, when you cross the line here in the middle, it's the energy line, and you really go from Jekyll to Hyde. You cannot straddle the line. You'll see that no matter where you are, you're not going to straddle. So again, we're looking at the full range of human behavior, all the way from effusive to critical at the bottom. And people tend to fall somewhere along this category. And then you've got your steadiness is the pace and how people respond to the pace of the environment around them. Some people above the line would be, if you're up here, for example, patient or passive, resistant to change. Most people, 50% of the population is actually above the line on steadiness and resistant to change. That's the most popular of all of these. And kind of a poker face as well, very hard to read. Below the line are your multitaskers. So above the line, you've got your single taskers, and then below the line, this one would be a multitasker, somebody who really thrives on working on multiple projects at once. So for those crazy maker bosses, you might have somebody who's a real multitasker and thrives on having a bit of a lot going on at one time. The other bosses who are single taskers, just prefer to work on one project at a time and see that through to the end. So again, depending on where your boss falls out, you could start to think about, how do they respond to the pace? Are they single taskers or multitaskers? And most people think they're multitaskers because we live in a multitasking world. But when you actually think about what I think the easiest way to tell it for yourself what you are is if you, for example, are driving in the car, and having a conversation with somebody, would you have the radio on? My friend is a multitasker. She has the radio on, having a conversation, and reading a magazine all at the same time as the passenger. That's typical multitasking. Whereas I'm like, well, if we're going to have this conversation, could we turn off the radio? I want you to focus on what you're saying. Typical single tasker there. So again, depending on the pace. And then we've got this compliance. That's how you respond to rules and procedures set by others. And we all the way up to the top of evasive, worrisome, careful, dependent, exacting, and neat, down to the bottom where you're careless with details. Again, complete opposite. Below the line in compliance tends to be people who are the rule breakers, the cut through red tape. Above the line, these are your engineers, your accountants, your bookkeepers, your systems people. They want things in order. They need a system. So you will find managers. Now, the traditional classic manager would be, somewhere in this D-I combination, the dominance and influencing. You'll find managers all over the place. So if you've got somebody who, for example, is a real micromanager, this might be your high compliance, high C. Here in this section, somebody who's up high in high C would be more of a control freak person who really wants to keep control of things. So you'll start to see people go all over the map here. You'll get different types of managers all over the place. The managers we tend to like the most are the ones who are have some warmth in them, the influencing, because they seem warm and friendly. They care about people and put people first, results second. But we need that decisiveness in people. That has to come from the D. Otherwise, you're not going to be decisive. You'll be a more indecisive manager, more unsure. So again, you'll get managers all over the place, but knowing this is the range of human behavior, you can start to think where you yourself might fall out on this, but again, where your manager does. And depending on where they do, it changes how we can communicate with them. So we'll just take this over to some communication tips. If you have a person who is, you think about the perfectionist, dependent, neat, conservative, careful, and compliant, this would be the person that would be, if we go backwards real quick, this would be your above the line on the compliance. That would be in this area here. So that when you're communicating with someone like that, and I was thinking these are the kind of people who would iron their shorts, really tidy and neat, and but again, they need a system to keep things in order. They like things to be in order. They don't speed. They follow the rules. This is your high compliance person. When you're dealing with them, they appreciate that somebody's done the research, and they'll be the kind of person who will do the research and say, okay, here's the 20-page report. I've done all the research, and they don't like necessarily to be pressed too quickly. They want the data to be correct and the time to do their research. So that's key when you're dealing with that person. So you can prepare your case in advance, make sure you're well organized, that you stick to business, and that you're accurate and realistic. Avoid being casual or giddy. Don't be unrealistic with deadlines, and don't be disorganized or messy. And when we adapt our communication to the person who's in front of us, we are much more likely to get a better result. So now, what if you're communicating? So when you think of this person, I don't know if I always think of Al Gore as being kind of the buttoned-up type, but somebody who's focuses on the details. But your typical systems person, logical. For example, if you think of the character Spock in the movie Star Trek, the original Star Trek movie, he would be a high C here in compliance, very, very diplomatic and cool, and low I, not any warmth in there, not an ounce of warmth in there. And so you'd get this sort of cool, logical character, and that would be your Spock character. If you were looking at Captain Kirk, that would be the high I leader, very, very magnetic. So that it kind of gives you. If you looked at Counselor Troy, she would be high S, the good listener. So that you're trying to tag who these people are. Okay. Now, so let's say you're dealing with somebody. If your boss is the more direct, forceful, decisive, strong-willed, think Fidel Castro, Margaret Thatcher, a little bit scary. They will be very decisive, so you don't have to worry about that. But they don't like talking about personal things, so don't ask them how was the weekend, how was the kids. They don't care about that. They want to just talk about business. So they'll find it quite refreshing if you say, can we just jump right into business? And they love that. Same with the C's. They're results oriented over here, the neat perfectionists. So you can stick right to business. You don't have to talk about personal things at all. In fact, they prefer that. And they want you to have the 3 bullet points. Be brief, specific to the point. They may want that 20-page report behind it, but they're going to want you to have, can you bottom line this for me? They don't want you to be blabbering on and on. So if you can talk briefly and to the point. I had a client who was convinced that his manager, that he was in trouble with his boss and that his manager didn't like him. And I just listened to him, but I said, you know what, you've got a high dominance boss, and it's not personal. They don't take things personally at all. You can have a knockdown, drag-out fight with them. I always think of like two rams butting head together and locking horns and really having a knockdown, drag-out fight. You can go head-to-head with them like that. And then, they will respect you for that. So you don't actually need to be, they're scarier. They come across as being a little bit scarier, but they're not actually as scary as they appear. So you can have that knockdown, drag out discussion with them, and it'll just blow over. If they do get cross, they tend to blow over very quickly. They don't hang on to things and may forget that they were brusque or cold or curt or something. They're just thinking they were being efficient and focusing on business. So knowing who your boss is can really help you tailor your communication so that they feel comfortable. And here's the thing. No matter what your style is, so we're going back, whether you're dominant in this person, their top things, this is a DI combination, but you might be high C, for example, and that would be your top thing above the line here. If you were high in compliance, you would have a very different personality style and would want that research and that report and the numbers and the facts and the figures. You wouldn't be happy without that. Whereas the high Ds, the dominants, they would be very happy just to have the 3-page, the 1-page summary report and bullet points, and they're very different. The warm, friendly people, you can ask them their family, the weekend, they like to talk, they're friendly, very easy. But people want to be communicated to in their own style. And so if you do that and try to match their style, what they prefer, you'll find you get better results. They'll be happier with you. They'll like you better, too. So you can be quite direct and to the point with a very sort of domineering boss. That doesn't bother them at all. Now, what about the person who's patient, predictable, reliable, steady, relaxed, and modest? That was the steadiness one, the green. They, again, break with a personal comment. Don't jump right into business. That's too threatening for them. Present your case softly. Ask how questions. Draw out their opinions. Do not rush into business straight away. Do not be too domineering or demanding. And don't force them to quickly close the sale. Don't try to close the sale on the top. Don't force them to come to a quick resolution or decision on the spot. They need time to process things. They need time to think about things. These are your steadiness people. They're single taskers. If you give them 3 or 4 projects at once, they could feel overwhelmed and not get anything done. So if you're working with a person like this and you're the manager or they're on your team, they'll be better off with 1 project at a time. And you will need to manage up with your boss and let them know, hey, okay, I know I've got 10 projects here. What's the number 1 thing that I need to be working on? What's the top priority here? And you really force your boss to give you some priorities, because otherwise you'll feel overwhelmed and not get anything done at all. And then when communicating with a person who is magnetic, enthusiastic, friendly, demonstrative, political, again, a friendly, warm environment. They don't necessarily like to deal with a lot of details. Ask them how they feel, bring out their opinions and comments with feeling questions, and avoid being too curt, cold, tight-lipped, or controlling the conversation or driving onto facts and figures. So they prefer to talk about the family or personal things to warm up before going into business. So those are just some basic tips on how to change your own communication style depending on who's in front of you at the moment. So I hope now you've been thinking about, what's my boss like? What are my other colleagues like? What am I like? How do I want to be communicated to? You will naturally communicate in your own style because you prefer that, being your own natural style. And the people that you're dealing with prefer to be communicated to in their style. So it's easier for you to know that and adapt in the moment. We do whole sales training courses sometimes just on this because it improves sales results. Okay. Tell you what, why don't we stop before I move on to the next bit, because that's quite a bit of information already. Are there any questions at this point? Is this making some sense?
Yeah, thanks, Telaine. So anyone who has an additional question, please ask it through the questions panel on the right-hand side. We do have one that had come through, and they were talking about they have a traditional boss who sets unrealistic time deadlines for his team. How does he get him to realize they can't work as quickly as he wants?
Yeah, so now I'm going to just guess the kind of boss that you're dealing with there, and we'll go back to, would be your, this one here, we're going right back. The ones who, the dominance types tend to be very impatient. They have a sense of urgency. It's kind of like chop, chop, let's get this thing done. They definitely can light fire under people's bottoms, which makes them good as leaders because they do have that pioneering, and they do have this ability to create a sense of urgency. And they can be quite, because they like to just focus on, let's just do the bullet points. They may not realize how long it takes to put together the 20-page backup report or to do the research. And so when you're dealing with us, and they'll typically be impatient, the most impatient ones are the high Ds because they want it done yesterday. And so if you have that kind of boss, and they can also be they're easy to spot. These are the bosses who are quick to anger, whether they're male or female. So they'll be very quick to anger. Also, they're quick to blow over, though, so that's a good thing. Your low D bosses, they will be the slow to anger, but then also very slow that can hang on to a grudge. So if that's like you, I know I'm very slow to anger myself, but boy, I don't forget things. So that's more you. But the Ds, it blows over quickly for the high Ds. So I'm going to guess that your manager is going to be this more impatient boss. And the key thing with them is just to go back to, again, the personal stuff. Don't say, oh, I can't do this because I'm sick or I've got an ailing mother. They don't care about personal stuff. They don't. So that's not going to win any points with them. But what you can do is be realistic with them and say, look, this is, appreciate that you need this done yesterday. Let's work out an actual timeline. And if you can chart out for them and say, okay, this is going to take us 1 week to do the IT work on this, and then we're going to need another week to do this bit in here. If you can actually map out and quickly go through that with them and say, this is a more realistic assessment of when we can get this done, and I don't want to promise to you to say we're going to get this done in 1 week when it's actually going to take us 3 weeks, and then you're going to look bad for your manager because we don't have it done in time, and it's just not going to be. So again, you can go right to head with them. They don't mind a head-to-head, and that's the good thing. Don't be afraid to challenge them. They enjoy a challenge. They love challenge. They love a little bit of conflict. It's fun for them. Sometimes they're even the firefighters making fires just so they can put them out for fun. So do not be afraid to challenge them and just make sure you've got yourself organized and you've got some clear bullet points. But do not use an emotional or a personal approach with that type of person. I won't work with them. Okay, it's a very good question. Any others?
Great, yes. We have 2 other ones right now, and one of them being around interview questions and just asking, are you able to ask the person who is interviewing you, how do they actually communicate with their boss, and how often? How does your boss offer you feedback on your work? So really, it seems like getting an insight on the potential hiring manager's communication style.
Yes, it'd be wise to kind of figure out what your boss's style is ahead of time. And by asking those sorts of questions, it's really good. You can sort of suss out, who am I dealing with here? Have I got a Fidel Castro type boss who is going to be real bossy and chop, chop, chop? Have I got a warm and friendly boss? Have I got, who have I got? I've got a nice steady boss. Different types of bosses or a real detail-oriented boss. So who am I dealing with here? And the more you know that ahead of time, the more likely to be successful right off the bat and choose the right conversational approach and style with dealing with them. It does make such a difference. My husband and I were doing a sales pitch to a manager we'd never met before. We went into his office, and he was literally barking orders to a person who was in there and sent him packing, and immediately we knew bullet points and press for the sale, go for the close. So we just knew that we were dealing with a high D character. You could see he was spouting anger, but again, came to see us completely charming. He was probably up to the place of being warm, but definitely driving on the dominance. And we knew right off the bat that we could go right to the point. Here's what you need to know. Boom, 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 and then just pretty much tell him that this you could sign on the dotted line here, and it worked. But you couldn't do that for somebody who was a high S steadiness type boss. That wouldn't fly.
Great. And
Go ahead.
And
yep.
we'll do one more question, Telaine, and then we'll have a few for the end too. It seems actually in line with what you were just saying with the controlling boss, but this person also has a controlling type boss, and they try and be very direct in their email and communication, but no matter how hard they try to be clear, the boss misunderstands her message. Then she ends up with a negative response from her boss. Is there a special way that she should be thinking about better communicating? For example, should she literally be using bullet points when emailing her manager?
Yes. Yes, if you have a very direct bullet points would be good. You may find it more effective to, I don't know if it's possible, but to have a weekly meeting where you can actually have 10 minutes, and you don't need time, so 10, 15 minutes, doing it short, quick, to the point, but an in-person meeting where you say, can I have 10 minutes, and go over the points and bullet points and say, okay, boop, 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 do you want, and have them make decisions for you, because they like making decisions, they're good at it, and they can help you prioritize your work, and if you have a quick question. So having that weekly time, whether it's a phone call or a quick pop-in for 15 minutes in their office, that might be better. Some people learn in different ways, and this has nothing to do with these 4 colors here, but some people are better at remembering what they've read, and some people are better at remembering what they've heard. And if your boss is not understanding written communication, it may be that your boss is the kind of person who just doesn't remember the written word. So even though they understood it at the time, it's not lodging in their brain. You may be better off picking up the phone and trying that and seeing if they don't remember what you say more effectively, or if you're able to do that. But again, stick to bullet points, and you might want to say, okay, there's 3 things I want to go over you. Number 1, blah, 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 blah. And then number 2, da, 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 number 3. And just really use the numbers it will make you come across as very organized. It will be your bullet points verbally and in an oral fashion, and that can really help it just will make you seem much more organized and professional together. And the D's like that, the C's like that. Actually, pretty much everybody likes that. If you can say 1, 2, 3, that's great. So yes, good point there. Do use your bullet points.
Great, thank you. And please continue to write questions in, and we'll take some more at the end.
Okay. So again, these 2 communication tip pages, you can use those to help you remind you. First, figure out who you're dealing with on the overall, where do they fall on this? This is just one option here, the colored in bits. But who are you dealing with, and then how you could tailor your communication to get the best results from them. Okay? So now, this is a problem what people have with almost every style of bosses. How do you actually get out of doing something? That demanding boss or people with unrealistic expectations. How do you say no gracefully? How do you? Because we want to say yes. We want to look like team players. We want to show willing and eagerness to do what our bosses want us to do. But so you really need to have a clever strategy on how to not get yourself overwhelmed with things. For example, I had a client working at AT&T, and her big boss, she was an executive level, senior executive, and her big boss thought nothing of calling her during the week in the evenings at home to talk about work. Now, she didn't have kids, but she did have a relationship, and she felt it was an intrusion on her private time, but she was afraid to say anything because this was the big boss. And you've got to say something. You've got to have some boundaries here. And so she basically said, do you really, just very calmly, do you realize that I consider the evenings to be my private time? Just like that. Oh. And he carried on for a little bit, but yeah, actually, I prefer that we dealt with this in the morning. Would you like me to come into your office in the morning? So showing willing, but also having some boundaries. Now, it was the same boss as well, was used to having Saturday meetings or Sunday meetings on the weekends, and she didn't like those. But the whole team was, again, nobody liked it, but they were all afraid to say no. And so, again, she put her foot down and said, look, I don't work on the weekends. I'd be very happy to come in on a Monday and get this sorted, or if we can handle this on Friday, then we take the weekend off. And, I'm very happy to do the work, and these are the times I'm available for it. So showing that you can do it, but saying this is where I'm not available. And then she actually, the boss respected her, and everybody else on the team who was afraid loved her because she was the only one who had the courage to speak up and say, well, actually, no, it's okay to say no to these things. So you do need to have that ability, and using just a completely flat, neutral tone of voice and saying, I'm sure you're not aware, but I consider the weekends to be sacrosanct. And I'm very happy to do this work on a Monday morning. I have to get there early and whatever. So you can say what you're willing to do, but not be taken advantage of. Now, when somebody's saying, oh, I've got this great project for you, blah, 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 do you think you could do this? And you have some choices. You might say, yeah, actually, I really want to work on that great project, but you've got too much else on your plate. How can you show your boss? I've had clients do all sorts of visual stuff works great. If you can create a wall chart, a visual chart, and it can either be on the computer or it can be an actual physical wall chart where you've mapped out your various projects, and then you show your boss and say, okay, great. Here's project X this week. Should I put that one on hold? Should I bump that back a week? So here's the three projects I'm currently working on: project A, project B, and project C. Blah blah blah. Should one of these? Something's got to give here. So, and basically ask your boss to prioritize. And your boss might say, "Oh my gosh, I forgot that you're working on A, B, and C. Let me give this to Joe Smith." And he walks off, or she walks off and gives it to somebody else. Or you might say, "Yeah, I really want to do that. Can I give project C to so and so that I can take this on?" But you've got to give something away, obviously, because you're probably already overloaded. But a visual wall chart is a really wonderful way of giving your boss power and control, because they can see, and you're asking, how should I prioritize here? Should I put this on hold? Can we give this to somebody else to work on? So you're getting their input, and it shows your willingness, but it's also, letting them see what you're actually doing, because a lot of the times bosses don't realize just how much you're doing. They lose track of how many projects you've actually been giving. Or they might even say to you, I've had this happen with clients where they've said, oh, what do you mean you're working on that project? That's not important. And you find out this thing you've been working on is not really that important. So that's helpful to know. So you can use wall charts. You can use an online progress chart. I had another client who was always being asked to do things from other people, and his boss, he finally put together a chart for his team. He wasn't the manager. This is, again, managing up. He was just one of the team players. But he set together this online chart which would go green and red when people's deadlines weren't being met. So he mapped out the whole entire team, and you could immediately see if somebody's, because his complaint was, he was doing his work and getting it on time, but the rest of the team weren't. And so he was looking bad because he was the final guy, and it looks like he was so basically he had to very cleverly manage the whole team and his boss's perceptions, because he was ending up looking like the loser of the lot when it actually wasn't his fault. But then how do you say that and say, oh, well, it's not my fault because so-and-so, and then you look like a real loser too because you're blaming somebody else. So again, that doesn't work. So he very cleverly created this spreadsheet, and I think it's part of the Microsoft Office, which showed when people were running behind on their own deadlines for their pieces that they had to get to him or to other people on the team. And then they could immediately see where the problems were and who was dragging their feet. And it wasn't so much to blame, but to say, okay, what help do you need? Because obviously you're running behind here. What's going on? What support do you need? What's the obstacles you're facing? So, in a very positive, proactive way, not like, oh, you don't want to blame people. But it did help him manage his whole team, not only his boss, because he was getting bad reviews, and turned that whole situation around. Okay, so just some clever ways of managing the situation, managing your workload there. Another strategy, another problem people have, especially with bosses who are the egotistical boss, are the ones who kind of take all the credit. How do you end up getting noticed for your own work without coming across as being too braggy yourself? So especially for men, men can actually brag and it comes off all right, but when a woman does it, it doesn't seem to work. So not every strategy that men use works for women because we have different cultural expectations of women. We expect women to be nice. We don't mind so much if if a man is barking orders, but when a woman is, we somehow think that's not right, because of our cultural expectations that women are nurturers and gentle and soft and kind. And so this is the problem. There's this cultural perception, and then women just need to bust through that, and it's quite challenging in a corporate setting. So the things that men can get away with, women can't necessarily do that, and a lot of times women don't get credit for some of the things that they've done, or even men as well. So keys to doing that when you're and the other thing is as well, it's actually okay for your boss to take credit for your stuff. I mean, that's actually legitimate. So it's nice if your boss does give you credit. So I think if you let go of the expectation that you should get credit for your projects and that your boss should do that, if you let go of that and just say, you know what, he's the boss, she's the boss, she can take credit, that's perfectly legitimate. That's the benefit of being a boss. If you can do that, then it helps you kind of relax about that you should get credit. And good bosses do give credit, but not everybody does. And they don't have to. And I think if you can let go that that's not a requirement, it's easier to say, okay, well. But you still want to make sure you get yourself recognized. And you can do it with clever ways like, I really want to thank my manager for his or her support in completing this project successfully. I really appreciate their support, whether or not they gave that to you. And I want to thank the members of my team who did blah, 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 and then bring out, Susie did this and Joe did that and Samantha did this. And you bring out all the people and say this is what their contributions were. So while you're not talking about yourself, you're standing up, acknowledging the other people and acknowledging your boss, making everybody else look good. It's a great way to get noticed without bragging, because ultimately you're going to look good for having had a good team of people around you. So even if you're not the team leader, you can stand up and acknowledge people in a meeting or when there's an opportunity to do that, and that will be a way to get you noticed without necessarily saying anything about yourself personally, but giving other people credit. Okay. Using numbers is also helpful for people if you're in a meeting. For example, if you're in a meeting and you're trying to get a point across and are struggling to do it, or if you have some ideas and things, the key thing here is to start with, instead of saying, I think we should, you just make the statement. So drop I think from anything, or in my opinion, just drop that altogether and just start with a statement. So for example, you could just say, we can improve sales by 10% if we did A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3. Just make a statement of whatever it is. Now, clearly it's your opinion because you're saying so. So you don't have to say, in my opinion. Just deliver it as a statement of fact. And it's a very powerful way to be heard, and people are more likely to hear you when you say that. And also, let's say you say, we could transform this department by doing these key things. Number one, there's 3 key things that would transform this department. Number 1 is blah, blah, blah. So using your numbers. Now, people might start talking in a meeting about that point number 1 and say, well, blah, 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 and it goes off track. But because you said there's 3 key things, eventually somebody will come back to you without you having to interrupt or, be domineering or anything. So somebody will come back and say, well, wait a minute, what about points 2 and 3 you mentioned? So you'll actually be, in a sense, controlling the meeting because it will come back to you for points 2 and 3. But you won't look like a controlling person. It'll all naturally come back to you. So that's the power of using numbers in a meeting when you want to make your points across. It's a great way of getting heard, whether you're a man or a woman, but particularly women tend to get interrupted a lot. And so if you're trying to make your point without having to interrupt, people will naturally come back to you because they're curious about what's next, what's number 2 and what's number 3. So just a few little tips there. Very subtle stuff, but again, it's a way of managing a meeting when you're not the manager. Do you see how you can control things more than you think? Okay. So with that one, you want to delete the words I from your vocabulary and just use, say things as a statement. You don't need to say I think. And even if you're complimenting somebody, so for example, instead of saying, oh, I really like your tie, You could just say, great tie. You have a great sense of style. And leave I completely out of it. We use I a lot. You might be shocked to realize how much you use it. You might say, well, I think we could. And I catch myself, even in emails, I catch myself deleting I think, and I just delete it. You don't need to use those words. It limits it to your opinion. And even if people think it's your opinion, and they know it's your opinion in a sense, but you don't need to limit it. You can deliver it as if it's a truth, a universal truth. Sales will go up by 15% if we do A, B, and C. 1, 2, or 3. Just try it. You'll see. And then the voice of power is that neutral tone of voice and saying things in a flat, neutral way. Not too excited about it, not negative, just completely neutral, but just as you would say the sky is blue. And then, of course, using the numbers. Okay? Let's see where we are. So let's take a look at our Managing Up checklist. I'm going to give you the next, and this is your homework here. You're going to see that there's a series, and this will be, Heather will send this out to you, but we have a series basically of checklists for you to see where you might have some questions on this, how well you're doing in managing up. So are you empowering your manager to manage you well? So that's point number 1. I empower my manager to manage me well. Well, what does that mean? Let's say you have a micromanaging boss, which many of you do, and you have a need to be free and independent. So you're going to really chafe under a micromanaging boss because it goes against your own need to be free, to do things yourself. So you need to talk to your manager and say, hey, look, I do my best work when I'm given free rein. So I'd like you to give me a project and let me run with it. Now, if I have a question, I'll come back. So I promise you I'll come back if there's something that's not clear and check in with you. Or what sort of communication do you need from me to feel like you're managing and in control of things? So the key thing when you have a micromanaging boss is to recognize that their need to be in control will only disappear if you satisfy that need. So you're going to have to go for satisfaction. What do they need to feel in control? Do you need to call them once a day with a quick update? Do you need to have a weekly meeting to give them an update and ask questions? To find out what they need. And if you take charge of that relationship, I once had a boss who, again, micromanaging and the high dominance type, very bossy, typical boss, and just really, really fiery as well. It's quick to anger. And she wanted me, when I first started working for her, to fill in these long weekly sales reports and just a report of everything. I was used to manage a financial center downtown in Manhattan, and she wanted me to report on everything, and I hated that. I hated writing up reports. And so my initial reaction was to resist doing it or to do a little short bullet point thing. And actually, I needed to satisfy her need to feel in control. So what I did was actually write really long 3-page reports, and then I would call her up and go over them in detail with her and talk about them. And I had to do that about 3 weeks before she said, okay, Tulane, you know what, I think just a quick bullet point report once a week will do, and you don't need to call me. So she got tired of it. So that's the key. Once you satisfy their need and they feel like they're in control, it disappears, and then you're left to be free. So it's almost the reverse of what you think. Your tendency will be to run away or not do it, and that actually doesn't help. You're much better to go for over-fulfilling their need to be in control and making sure that they feel that. Once they feel that, they're more likely to actually loosen up, and that's the irony of it. So you need to tell your manager, every person needs something different. You saw from our little, 4-color quadrant there, we're all over the map. And your boss doesn't have that little quadrant and doesn't necessarily know that you need to be free, and that somebody else might have the need for clarity. The high C compliance types tend to want a lot of instructions and a lot of clarity. So on your own, the boss might have one person who wants a lot of clarity, a lot of detail, a lot of instruction, another person who doesn't want any of that and wants just give me the ball, I'm going to run with it. So again, your boss needs to know from you what you need to do your best work. So that's just a quick thing. Are you actually telling your boss what you need and how you're best managed? So we think that they should figure this out, but it's complicated. All right, I think we'll start there. These checklists, some of them are fairly self-explanatory, but I'm going to show you there's a lot of them. So we're going to talk about healthy boundaries. Started a little bit on that. The teamwork checklist, personal balance checklist, self-management checklist, communication checklist, quality work checklist, take initiative checklist, career path checklist. So you can see there is plenty for you to do this week. Now again, these are not rocket science, but either yes or no, tick them off if they're true for you and you're actually doing this. Put a question mark on any of these that you're not sure about and you want to ask me about next week. And then of course, so that you can actually do that. And we'll also get any other questions that we have right now, so I'll open up the floor. But I want you to take this as your homework, and we're going to send you these to you so you can print them out. And then we're going to talk about these next week and go through some of the key questions. Obviously, I can't go through every single point on these, but I'm going to hit the key points that are the most common questions. So that's what we're going to do next week. So I hope you can come back for that and that this has been helpful so far. But let's get some I think we have some time, don't we, Heather, for a few more questions?
Yes, great. Yep, we have about 5 minutes. So we've actually had several questions around hands-off bosses. So one question said they're at the point where the boss is very hands-off, often to the point where she finds herself craving any direction or regular communication on projects, not to mention feedback. Any tips on communicating with someone who may be a manager by organizational design but doesn't enjoy that part of his job and or is just maybe more hands-off in general?
Yes, now that's a perfect example because, again, people tend to treat others the way they want to be treated. So, for example, if you have the need to be free and independent, you might think, well, everybody wants that. I'm not going to burden them with a lot of details. I'll let them get on with it. Whereas you might be new or not clear on the project or just somebody who also needs more clarity, so that doesn't work for you. So again, this is why we really have to help with our managers and let them know. So your job is, again, to empower your boss. You're going to have to go in and say, I need a bit more clarity here. And that might be that you schedule a weekly meeting and say, okay, whether it's by phone or in person. And so many people now are working virtually or not in the same location anymore. But if you can pop in and say have a half an hour a week meeting, either by phone or in person, if you can, ideally, and just have that as a regular thing so that you can get that clarity you need and just say, okay, here's my key questions, And then if you have that set time, then both of you will know that you can save that time up to ask any key questions. Obviously, if there's an emergency, you would let your boss know right away, but if there's anything mission critical, you'd let your boss know if there's a problem right away. But for basic stuff that can wait, having that regular check-in time really helps. So I would recommend that for you, and that would be the chance where you could go through, can you clarify this for me? Or, this is the direction I was thinking of going. Does that work for you? And you can put together some stuff like that to help your boss manage you and get that clarity that you're missing. Okay, so a really good question.
Great, thank you. And this person talks about that their boss is terrible at making decisions. Do you have any recommendations of how he could work better with his manager?
Yeah, no, that's a tricky one. So sometimes your boss, if you have an indecisive manager, you may need to help them come to decisions. So what you can do is kind of gently point out of, here's our different options, and if we choose this one, then this is going to happen, and kind of spell it out for them. If we choose this one, this is the result we'd get. If we choose this one, this is the result we get. And then paint whichever one you think is the best. But actually help your boss. Maybe you can be the decision maker if that's a strength of yours. Help your boss to see clearly what's the right way forward. Or if your boss is not decisive, have it come to a meeting where in the meetings you come to the conclusion and say, all right, we need to make a decision here to move forward. Shall we take a vote or something? You could suggest that even and say, should we take a vote and see, given these are our three options, which do we think is the best for the company or what's the best for the bottom line? So again, sort of taking over, and you have to be careful about this. You don't step on toes. But I think if you do it in a positive, proactive way of outlining these are the different repercussions, because sometimes people don't see, some people are very good at seeing how things will turn out and some people aren't. So that should help.
Perfect. And Telaine, we are just about out of time. We do have several other questions, but I will make sure you get those for next week's presentation to try and incorporate there. And any final words from you before I wrap up?
Well, I just wanted to thank you all for coming. I do hope you come back next week, and feel free if we didn't. Heather did promise that she would send over the questions to me, so I will try to incorporate all those into the comments for next week. I think best bet, if you want a resource to look at in the meantime, I would say go with Coach Yourself to Success. That's my first book as a sort of basic primer. It has the communication skills in that and some good tips are there for that. We'll save this for next time. If you really can't work out on solving the relationship with your boss, then you might need to change jobs, but we'll save that. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, we've got all those wonderful options for you. And if there's anything that you want to contact me about, feel free to do that at info@lifecoach.com. We've got some handouts. I've given you even more homework, so I'll point to the Clean Sweep program is for you personally. That's part of managing yourself. The True Values program, again, this is more about what's most important to you and making sure you're a match for the values of your company. And then we're going to send you separately, we're going to send you these checklists on the slideshow here so that you'll have that to work on for next week. All right, so just encourage you to do your homework and come back prepared next week with specific questions that will help benefit you in your own relationship with your manager and your team.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Telaine, and huge thank you to everyone for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, later today you will receive a link of this recording, a survey link, which is also will be shared in the chat feature right now too, as well as information, if you haven't already, to register for Part 2 next week on the 30th. In addition, the documents that are currently on the right-hand side, the handouts that Telaine talked through, and whether you can get in front of them or not, we would love you to join for the Part 2 session. And to view any upcoming additional webinars, please review our website at www.colorado.edu/alumni/webinars. And on behalf of the Leeds School of Business, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Go Buffs!